I'll never forget the night my own mother looked me dead in the eye and said, loud enough for the entire family to hear, "Rachel, you are the biggest disappointment we've ever had." The room erupted in cruel laughter. My brother raised a glass to his success. My sister flaunted her diamond bracelet, while I sat frozen, every word slicing deeper than the last. They believed I was weak, that I would forever be the one cleaning up their debts, swallowing their insults, and begging for scraps of affection. But they were wrong. 4 years, I had quietly kept records, every dollar stolen, every lie told. And this Christmas, I wasn't coming as their scapegoat. I was coming as their reckoning. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34 years old, a financial consultant living in Seattle. On paper, I have what many would call a good life. My own firm, a comfortable apartment overlooking the city, and the freedom to travel whenever I please. People who meet me for the first time often say, "Rachel, you're so lucky. You've got it all figured out." If only they knew the truth. Behind closed doors, I have always been the invisible child. My mother, Evelyn, never hid her favorites. My older brother, Daniel, was her golden boy, the former college football star who lived off past glory even though he never managed to keep a real job. Claire, my sister, was the picture-perfect daughter, fashionable, ambitious, married into wealth. She didn't need to work, and she loved reminding me of that fact. And then there was Lily, the youngest, the baby of the family, spoiled rotten and shielded from every responsibility. Her tuition, her car, even her rent, paid for by someone else. By me. Yes, me, Rachel. The one who never quite measured up, yet somehow became the backbone of the entire family. The one who was expected to clean up every disaster, smooth over every crisis, and sacrifice quietly without complaint. When Daniel's house went into foreclosure, I bailed him out. When Lily racked up credit card debt from endless shopping sprees, I paid it off. When Dad's health failed and insurance refused to cover his back surgery, I wrote the check without hesitation. And what did I get in return? Not gratitude, not respect, just entitlement. They never once said thank you. To them, it was my duty. "You're good with money," Mom would say dismissively, as if my years of education and hard work meant nothing more than being the family's personal ATM. For years, I swallowed the pain. I convinced myself that love required sacrifice, that maybe one day they would appreciate me, see me as more than just the safety net. I held on to the fragile hope that if I kept giving, they would finally give back. Love, kindness, acceptance. But hope turned to bitterness with every demand, every manipulation. I realized that I wasn't their daughter or their sister. I was their provider, their excuse, and when things went wrong, their scapegoat. And so I began to keep track. Every bank transfer, every wire, every receipt, every late-night text message dripping with guilt, every email begging for just one more favor. At first, I didn't know why I was saving it all. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was survival. Or maybe, deep down, some part of me always knew this day would come, the day when I would stop being their safety net and finally stand up for myself. That day was closer than any of them could have imagined. It happened last Christmas. The Morgan family dinner was supposed to be tradition, though for me it was more like a ritual humiliation. Evelyn, my mother, was in her element, floating from guest to guest, her laughter sharp as glass. The dining table was draped in gold and red, glittering with candles and wine glasses. To outsiders, we probably looked like the picture of a happy, prosperous family. But I knew the truth behind every smile. Evelyn started, as always, with her favorite subject, Daniel. "He's launching a new investment," she boasted, as though his last 3 failures had never happened. She called him ambitious, while I silently recalled the foreclosure I had paid to keep him afloat. Then came Claire, her perfect daughter. Evelyn praised her charm, her marriage, her children. Claire held up her wrist to show off a new diamond bracelet, flashing it like a trophy. And Lily, the baby, was full of potential, Evelyn gushed. Everyone cooed at her stories about college parties and networking opportunities. No mention of the tuition, the car, or the credit cards quietly funded by me. Then the spotlight turned my way. I smiled politely, rehearsed in my role as the family's afterthought, and said, "It's been a great year. My firm closed over $1 million in contracts." Evelyn didn't even blink. She waved her hand like I was a child showing her a drawing. "Rachel, nobody cares about numbers. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you'll ever give me something to be proud of." The words landed like a slap. And then, the laughter. Not just hers. The whole table. Even Lily giggled behind her wine glass. I tried to steady my breath, but Daniel leaned in with that smirk I knew too well. "Hey, Rachel, speaking of money, any chance you could help me with a small loan? Just 20 grand this time." Claire sipped her champagne and chimed in sweetly, "Yes, Rachel, it's Christmas after all. Isn't this the time for generosity?" Then Lily, without hesitation, "And my stipend's late. Could you spot me rent until January?" The air grew heavy, not with shame, but with expectation. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't even pretending anymore. They believed it was my job. I opened my mouth to speak, but Evelyn cut me off. She set down her glass and delivered the final dagger. Her voice was calm, almost tender, but her words cut deeper than any scream. "You know, Rachel, for someone who earns so much, you've given us so little. Claire has children. Daniel had his career. Lily has potential. What do you have?" "Nothing." Silence followed. For half a second, I thought someone might defend me. But then, laughter again. A chorus of it. My own family, laughing at the disappointment. Something broke inside me that night. I smiled back at them, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile you give right before the storm hits. Because in that moment, I decided, this ends. The first step was simple. Pretend nothing had changed. 4 months, I kept my mask firmly in place. I still answered their calls. I sent Daniel a small loan for his car repairs. I slipped Claire money for her kids' ballet costumes. I even wired Lily cash for her textbooks. On the surface, I was the same dependable Rachel, quiet, compliant, endlessly available. But behind the scenes, I was building a trap so carefully they wouldn't see it coming until it snapped shut. Step 1. Documentation. I organized everything I had collected over the years. Bank transfers, messages dripping with guilt trips, emails where they practically confessed to manipulation. My lawyer, Hannah Pierce, nearly dropped her coffee when she saw the pile. "Rachel, this isn't just evidence. This is a pattern of financial abuse." "Exactly. And I wanted it already." Step 2. Leverage. I started creating situations that exposed their dependence on me. With anonymous accounts, I offered to help Daniel cover his mortgage arrears, then withdrew the payment right before the deadline. Claire's credit card bills? I sent in payments that mysteriously vanished, leaving her to face angry calls from the bank. Lily's tuition? I promised the bursar's office a wire transfer, only to cancel it at the last second. I didn't ruin them outright. Not yet. I just let them teeter on the edge. Enough to make them desperate. Enough to ensure that by Christmas, they would come crawling. Step 3. The audience. A performance means nothing without spectators. So I sent out a few discreet invitations. A journalist who covered local society scandals. 2 family friends my mother adored. And, of course, Hannah. She would be there not just as my legal shield, but as my witness. Step 4. Timing. The Morgans always prided themselves on Christmas. The long dining table. The glittering tree. The endless wine. It was the one night of the year where appearances mattered more than truth, which made it perfect. I could picture it already. Daniel bragging about a business deal he never closed. Claire showing off borrowed jewelry as if it were hers. Lily whining about her potential. And my mother, Evelyn, raising her glass as if she were the queen of our little dynasty. That's when I would strike. I wasn't planning to scream, or cry, or beg them to understand. No, my plan was colder, sharper. I would expose them with facts, one by one, until their carefully curated masks shattered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter, the scapegoat, or the bank. I was the storm they never saw coming. And Christmas would be the night they realized it. Christmas night arrived. The Morgan mansion was dripping in luxury, gold ornaments on the tree, silverware polished until it gleamed, and the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. Laughter spilled through the halls as though nothing ugly had ever stained this family. I walked in quietly, wearing the same plain navy dress they had mocked a year earlier. I wore no diamonds, no designer heels. To them, I was still the simple one. But inside, I carried a storm they could not begin to imagine. Dinner passed in a blur. Daniel boasted about new investments, Claire bragged about her children's private school, and Lily complained about professors who didn't appreciate her brilliance. Evelyn, my mother, sat at the head of the table, her wine glass always full, her eyes shining with superiority. Finally, she raised her glass. To family, the strongest bond of all. That was my cue. I pushed back my chair and stood, steady and calm. Funny you should say that, Mom, because when I look around this table, all I see is betrayal. The room froze. Forks clinked against plates. Evelyn's smile faltered. "What nonsense are you talking about?" she snapped. I pulled out a stack of envelopes from my bag and slid one to each sibling. "Daniel, this is the foreclosure notice on your house. Claire, these are the overdue bills you've been hiding from your husband. Lily, this is the letter from your university. Tuition unpaid." Claire went pale. Daniel cursed under his breath. Lily's hands shook as she opened hers, tears spilling instantly. "Rachel, stop this ridiculous charade," Evelyn barked. "Oh, I'm just getting started." I turned to the side, where 3 unexpected guests sat quietly, 2 family friends, and Mr. Kent, a journalist whose phone was already live-streaming. The whole world could now see the Morgans for who they truly were. "You all want the truth? 4 years, I've been their bank. Every emergency, every mistake, they dumped it on me. And when I asked for love, for respect, they gave me nothing." I held up documents, signed transfers, text messages, emails. "Here's proof. Every dollar they stole, every lie they told, every time they bled me dry." Daniel shot up from his chair, rage in his eyes. "You can't do this to us." But before I could answer, Hannah, my lawyer, stepped forward with another folder. She dropped it on the table, the papers spilling like ashes. "Actually, Daniel," she said coolly, "you committed fraud when you used Rachel's identity for your business loans. That's a federal crime. And we've already submitted the evidence." Gasps filled the room. Daniel stuttered, his face draining of color. Claire tried to rise, but Hannah stopped her with a cold stare. "And you, Claire, you forged Rachel's signature to access her credit line. Do you really want your husband finding out about that tonight?" Claire sank back into her chair, trembling. Evelyn shouted, desperate now, "Rachel, you ungrateful child! How dare you embarrass us like this?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "How dare you call yourself a mother?" The room was chaos, whispers, curses, tears. But then a voice cut through. From the corner, a woman stood, Aunt Grace, my mother's estranged sister, whom Evelyn had banished from family gatherings years ago. Evelyn's face went rigid with shock. Grace spoke firmly, her voice breaking but strong. "Rachel isn't the disappointment, Evelyn. She's the only honest one in this family. You built this empire on lies and cruelty. And tonight, it crumbles. Evelyn's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. By New Year's, the Morgan Empire had collapsed. Daniel was the first to fall. The investigation into his fraudulent loans made headlines in the local paper. His smug grin vanished the day federal agents knocked on his door. The man who once boasted about making deals was suddenly facing court dates and possible jail time. The same relatives who used to praise him now whispered about his disgrace. Claire's perfect suburban fairy tale unraveled next. Her husband, after seeing the bills and the evidence of her lies, served her divorce papers. The woman who had spent years bragging about her flawless family image was now fighting for custody, her reputation in tatters. I almost pitied her, but then I remembered the way she had laughed when Evelyn mocked me. And Lily, sweet, spoiled Lily. Without tuition money, she had no choice but to face reality. She withdrew from school, begged for extensions, then finally got a job at a cafe. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the adored youngest daughter with endless potential. She was just another young woman working for tips. But the greatest fall was Evelyn's. Her throne was gone. The Morgan matriarch, who had spent decades cultivating power through appearances, was now the subject of hushed gossip. Friends she once entertained at galas avoided her calls. Her weekly brunch group grew smaller until no one showed at all. She had built her identity on control, image, and pride, and I had ripped it away in one night. And me. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I didn't throw a party. I simply breathed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their weight on my shoulders. No more endless loans, no more humiliation disguised as family bonding. The chains were gone. I bought Aunt Grace a house by the ocean, quiet, peaceful, far from the toxic grip of Evelyn's world. She was the only one who had spoken for me that night, the only voice that had risen above the laughter. She deserved peace as much as I did. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Christmas dinner. The looks on their faces. The way silence cut sharper than any blade. I had given them everything they wanted for years. Money, obedience, silence. And in the end, I gave them the one thing they never expected: justice. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. I wasn't the forgotten child, the punchline of family jokes. I was the reckoning. And for the first time in decades, I felt something I had never known in that house: freedom. 6 months later, I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. The silence of my phone, once filled with endless demands, became a kind of freedom. With that peace, I built something new, a foundation dedicated to helping women who, like me, had been shackled by toxic families. We offered workshops on financial independence, legal protections, and the courage to say no without guilt. Watching those women rise reminded me that my story wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Here's what I came to understand: revenge doesn't always mean ruin. It doesn't always mean fire and ashes. Sometimes revenge is simply shining a light so bright that the lies can no longer hide in the shadows. It's forcing people to face the truth of who they are without the mask they've worn for years. Family, I realized, isn't defined by blood or shared names. Family is the people who stand beside you when you are broken, who remind you of your worth when others try to erase it. For me, Aunt Grace became that anchor. For others, it may be a friend, a mentor, or even the community you choose to build for yourself. So let me ask you this: if justice doesn't sting a little, if it doesn't make the guilty squirm in their seats, can it truly be called justice? What do you think? Does justice always need a touch of revenge to feel real? Share your thoughts in the comments below.